Okay, let's cover a little summary of what we did today at the Peptides 101 workshop, the science of cellular optimization, and just a little bit of, here we go. I just want to say thank you for your time. We had a wonderful turnout, and I love when people ask questions because my job is here to educate you. So, a little bit about me. I am a chiropractic doctor, have been in practice for over 20 some years. I'm a happily married mom of three amazing children, and our family's all about health. So there is no we don't separate health, our personal and my professional life. So the opinions expressed in the seminar are for educational purposes only. They are not intended as a diagnosis, treatment, or substitute for professional medical advice. So always consult your physician or other healthcare provider, professional for any of your specific healthcare and or medical needs or concerns. Some of the peptides discussed today are for research use only and not intended for human use, while others are FDA approved. I always have to do this disclaimer. That's just what we do. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm getting this right. All right, so what is our agenda? What are you going to learn during this time? You're going to learn about what are peptides, what are some of the peptides that have been used for anti-aging, muscle and joint tendon, belly fat, fat loss, and we're going to learn about the delivery systems and what does the FDA have to do with peptides? So talking about your body, it's your journey. So everybody's body responds differently. We say you are your own biolab, you are your own chemistry lab. So always listen to it. And what happens with another person, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the same results. And even what you did a year ago may not work today. So let's talk about peptides. These are all amino acids here. And one thing I want to tell you, peptides are not drugs. So I just want to clear that up loud and clear. Your body makes the peptides. They're short chains of amino acids. They're not drugs. They basically are signaling, supporting, and optimizing your body. They're not medication. They're not magic. There is no shortcuts to get the results that you want. They're basically communication molecules or signaling molecules that impact and are biological messengers, and they're just part of human physiology. So stop calling peptides drugs. A lot of people like doing that. It's like calling a protein and pharmaceutical. So you just have to remember peptides are not going to fix everything. You have to do the work. You got to eat right, train right, and you got to learn how to recover. So let's talk about what are peptides. They're small chain of amino acids, and they're basically the building blocks of proteins. They give the specific instructions to your body, and each peptide has a very unique job. They act as little signaling molecules, and they tell your cells to perform more efficiently. And they're very specific. Like, hey, make more collagen. Hey, burn fat. Hey, repair this tissue. So they can encourage your body's own hormone, even your body's own hormone production. So proteins are long chain of amino acids. So you can see here, typically it's 50 and above, and they can be big sizes like this to the bottom right. And they could be smaller sizes like these, but they're typically 50 or more. So when you have peptides, they're smaller chains of proteins. So what is peptide therapy? Well, therapy works with your body's natural system to restore balance and vitality. It's really a whole body approach that can help build lean muscle, reduce stubborn body fat, recover from workouts faster. It helps with skin, reduce muscle and joint inflammation. And as we get older, communication lines get a little wonky. So just remember, your body does make peptides. Now, whether they're working properly is another story. That's why as we get older, those communication lines can get a little wonky. So why does it matter? Well, the body needs peptides to survive. There's different types of peptides that will affect different cells and functions, as I mentioned earlier, like fat loss, energy, sex drive, and even immunity. So they impact everything from aging and how quickly your body recovers. And it definitely impacts chronic disease, and we've seen it actually can reverse it. So are peptides cheating? We're going to talk about weight loss, and I'll hopefully link a couple of videos that I played at the workshop. So this is Serena Williams after having one of her babies, and she's going to come into the picture in a minute. So their weight loss peptides and fat loss peptides. First one that came out was a semaglutide, then tirzepatide, and then we have some in clinical trials right now that are retatrutides. And semaglutide has a GLP-1 agonist, so it would help with satiety, would slow down digestion. It basically will signal the brain that, hey, I'm full, quiets down that food noise. So we saw that a lot of Ozempic and Wegovy and the brand names. Then we have tirzepatide came out. So it's a dual agonist, and basically an agonist. It's binding to a specific receptor. It activates it to produce a biological response. It's just communication. Tirzepatide is a dual agonist. This was a single agonist. This is a dual agonist. It actually has it's GLP-1 plus GIP, and we're going to talk about what that is in a second. And it improves insulin sensitivity, and it's actually putting energy into the muscle and it's moving it out of fat. So that's pretty cool. Then we have this one under clinical trials right now. Is more than likely going to be rolling that out in 2026. So it is a triple agonist with the addition of the GLP-1 and the GIP. There's glucagon. So what's happening is actually increasing energy expenditure, and therefore you're getting stored fat breakdown. It's burning more fuel, and bodybuilders love this. A lot of them are using it for that purpose. So GLP-1 and GIP are incretin hormones, and basically what that means they're made by the gut. Okay. GLP-1 is glucagon-like peptide 1, and GIP is called glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide. So they are incretins. They will boost also insulin secretion. They slow down stomach emptying. They regulate the appetite, and they play a really crucial role in controlling blood sugar, especially after eating meals. So we've seen diminished function often seen in type 2 diabetes. So remember, these are all made in your body. And that's why a lot of people that were on it were losing weight. I'm going to talk about what other things, why there were some challenges with that as well. There's other effects that we're seeing right now, although some of them we do need larger scale trials for this. So they can really say that this is helping. But from my clinical experience and talking with other practitioners, this is what we're seeing. They can slow down and they can show significant neuroprotective potential by reducing the inflammation, oxidative stress, and neuronal damage. So some of the data is suggesting there's low risk of dementia, which is really just type 3 diabetes. That's a blood sugar issue, and stroke. There's also has been seen some improved outcomes like in Parkinson's and Alzheimer's patients. And the way they work is because they actually cross the blood-brain barrier and are activating receptors and potentially stimulating neurogenesis, just making of new nerves. Therefore, it reduces that pathological protein buildup in the brain. Some of the side effects that they were seeing specifically with the semaglutide, which was a single agonist, was constipation, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, stomach pain, desire. But they also saw the decreased desire for alcohol. But one of the problems is there was a lot of muscle loss, therefore there was bone loss. Remember, there you have a musculoskeletal system, so muscle and bone. So when you lose muscle, you're going to have bone as well. That's why we had a lot of people with Ozempic face and Ozempic butt. They just looked horrible because these should be used as a tool. It's not permission to do the same thing you're doing, but less of it. It's like, hey, instead of eating 4 double doubles, I'm now going to eat 2 double doubles. So a lot of time patients were not monitored and they were dosed too high. So that's why they were getting these side effects. Some things that are super important is you've got to support them with magnesium, vitamin D. I always like to use post-meal digestive aids like CCF, cumin, coriander, and fennel. Probiotics are super important, and you got to dose them slowly. So our peptide sheeting, I say ask Serena Williams. This is her on the left before and after using a GLP-1. So we'll be posting the link for the video for that one. So if your body makes it, maybe it's not a drug, right? And so we keep telling people, I don't take drugs and I'm not going to do it. Well, I say it's your choice, but let's talk about some other peptides. Let's talk about recovery. There's pain and anti-inflammatory peptides, and they're used a lot for healing and for recovery. The one that we know a lot about, you hear a lot, is BPC 157, Body Protective Compound 157, which is basically helping you promote muscle, tendon, and ligament healing. It does help with the connective tissue injuries like ligaments, tears, tendon sprains, joint injuries. Helps with reducing inflammation and discomfort from injuries and surgery. It also prevents stomach ulcer and is found in human gastric juices. It does have something called, there is angiogenesis, so there is also the production of new blood vessels. So you always have to make sure that you consult with a practitioner if you choose to do that. TB 500 is another one. So TB 500, um, it's usually not used by itself. It's usually paired up with the BPC 157, but we'll chat about that on the next slide. It enhances cell migration and tissue repair. So basically, this is doing the work. But TB 500 is also doing the work because it's basically kind of signaling, say, hey, come over here, go over here. This is where the injury is. So that also accelerates the healing of injuries and muscles, tendons, and ligament. Helps also with inflammation. It also reduces tissue adhesions and improves flexibility. This is great for recovery of acute and also chronic injuries. There's a synthetic version of thymosin beta 4. Now, in the peptide world, and as you start learning about this, there's something called peptide stacks. Peptide stacks is when you are pairing up when you have two of the same peptides in the same vial. So the Wolverine stack is the BPC 157 and the TB 500. It kind of say it's like the Batman and Robin of the recovery peptides, the dynamic duo. When they work together, they cover both localized and systemic healing, therefore named Wolverine because of its resilience, rapid healing, and strength, kind of like the comic book character who regenerates rapidly. Then you've got Glow. The Glow peptide stack is the BPC 157, TB 500, and it is actually the GHKCU is added. So there's three of them. So kind of like to equate that to a healing trifecta. What the copper does in there, it promotes activation of wound healing and it attracts immune cells to that area. So it also has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects when you use the stack, the Glow. Does stimulate collagen production. And I always say collagen is like the glue that holds the structures together. So the Wolverine stack, some of the results. This is Hugh Jackman, 30s. This is him, almost like 25 years later. It's like, what happened to this guy with all the training that he's done and movies and so forth? So, the Wolverine stack, some of the results you're going to get is accelerated tissue repair, reduce inflammation and pain, enhance collagen synthesis and angiogenesis. There's improved joint mobility and flexibility. Also helps with gut health. That's more the BPC 157. And we're also seeing faster post-surgical recovery. So, okay. So I'm going to ask you again, are peptides cheating? If you don't know the story about Jeremy Renner, we're going to link the video there, but he was in a horrific accident January 1st. I want to say it was 2020 or was it 20? I'll have to look at the dates. I wrote the dates down, but it was recent. And he's lucky to be alive. I mean, he was crushed and multiple fractures. This is about a year and a half later. He did an interview with in Men's Health about, here it is, Jeremy Renner back from the dead and stronger than ever. And he talks about a little bit about his story, but also how he used peptides and also how he used hormone replacement therapy for recovery. It's really a fascinating story. We also now have something called growth hormone secretagogues. Oops, let me go back there. Growth hormone secretagogues. These growth hormone releasing hormones, and I call them belly fat peptides too, because we start losing, there is a decline in growth hormone once we hit about 30. We slowly decline each year and it accelerates as we progress in the timeline of life. So GHRH or something called a growth hormone releasing hormone, and it tells the pituitary gland to release growth hormone. It's not overriding your system because there are growth hormones that a doctor can prescribe so that you can make growth hormones, but it doesn't, it's not signaling the pituitary gland in your brain to make it. Well, the growth hormone releasing hormone, this peptide here, it is just, it's telling the gland to make some. It's also very powerful for fat metabolism, especially when you're fasted. So these are instructed to be taken when when you're fasted in a fasted state. We've seen really great results with fat reduction, visceral fat reduction, especially those around the organs and that belly fat. And it works on a very specific receptor, the growth hormone releasing hormone receptor. So the big ones that we hear a lot about are sermorelin and tesamorelin. Sometimes they're taken alone. Most of the time, tesamorelin, that is the one that we're lots of great results. There's actually studies that tesamorelin was used with the patients that had AIDS because of the medication that they were on and just the disease process of the AIDS. Um, they were actually like they were skinny, but they had a lot of fat, and a lot of fat was around the visceral area. So they actually used tesamorelin for that, and they saw amazing results reducing that visceral fat. So tesamorelin was the one that they were using. Then you have the other one, which is called GHRP. That's a growth hormone releasing peptide. Now, it also improves body composition. It also enhances recovery and repair. You have better sleep and energy. It's been used for anti-aging and wellness. It's used in those circles. The big one that we hear a lot about is ipamorelin. That works on a different receptor, so the ghrelin receptor. And unlike GHRH, usually it does not impact cortisol or prolactin. Sometimes when people do take the tesamorelin, they feel a little bit bloated because of the receptors site that it's working on. So most of the time we see these two paired up, Tessa and IPA, and you see a combination of those, but those are typically taken at nighttime away from food and a fasted state. Otherwise, you're wasting your money. Then we got some about energy, mitochondria one. So let's talk about energy. These are the mitochondria and energy peptide. MOTS-c is one, NAD is not, NAD plus is not, but it's always mentioned in the circle of peptides. So MOTS-c is a mitochondria encoded peptide. It basically helps promote stress resistant. Your cell, the cell is just more resistant and it survives in toxic conditions. I mean, gosh, we live in a toxic world. It's used for weight loss also because it does regulate how your body metabolizes fat and also muscle. So this is used a lot by athletes to enhance performance. And it's also, there's a lot of promising effects in the longevity field. So a lot of people in Hollywood are using peptides. I mean, they're not going to come out and tell you the secret sauce of what they're doing. A handful will. NAD plus is called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And basically what that is, it's not a peptide though, but it's a coenzyme that's found in every living cell in your body. So it's super important. It does help with energy production. You get DNA repair. Therefore, you see a lot of anti-aging benefits. Great for cellular metabolism and brain health. This is often done in drips. Some people can take it orally. The effectiveness when it's taken orally is probably not as high as drips, but who has an hour and a half or 2 or 3 hours to get a massive dose of this going in. So injections are becoming a little bit more popular with the biohacking field, those starting to use peptides. So let's talk about the beauty peptide. The beauty peptide is also known as GHKCU copper. So also known as, like I said, the beauty peptide. What happens with this, it's actually promoting activation of wound healing. So, and it's also attracting immune cells to that area. So it does have a lot of antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects. And those are, that's what ages you. Oxidation ages you. If you look at a car that's been it's driven in the winter, you're going to get rust on it. That's just oxidation. Anti-inflammatory, inflammation is not bad, but chronic inflammation will age you. If you ever see a person that has been under a lot of stress, their body stress there's inflammation with when stress, regardless if it's a physical, chemical, or emotional stress. So I did talk a little bit about that in the workshop. Your body does just recognizes that stress is there's a lion coming to chase me. So we see a lot of issues with that. So it also can stimulate collagen production. And as I mentioned previously, think about collagen as the glue that holds all these structures together. So it's super important. So there's another one that we talked about as well. I would say let's have a fun. Let's have fun again with sex because there's also a sex drive, diminution sex drive. This one usually works within 30 to 60 minutes. Does increase arousal for both men and women. And what we're seeing, the other name for it, it's called PT-141, also known as bremelanotide. It's also, like I said, a desire and arousal peptide. It increases arousal and desire and satisfaction with sex. So don't use this more than 2 times a week. If you get this, it's going to be very specific that you should not use it more than 8 times per month. Some of the side effects, as I talked in the workshop, is that for guys, you can have an extended erection for a couple days, and it's not a good thing. So the arousal is in the nervous system, and it has helped with men with erectile dysfunction or impotence, and even women who have sexual arousal disorder. They just have no desire to have sex. They're like, I'm good if I don't have sex anymore. Sex is something that God created, and it's a way for a man and a woman to be intimate. So, and reproduction. We also talked about sleep. Well, what about sleep? Did you know that there's a hormone for sleep or peptide for sleep? It's called deep sleep inducing peptide. So with this, what this does, it does promote deep restorative slow wave sleep. That's what we want. Now, when you're sleeping, there is a lot going on. There's a lymphatic system in your brain, and basically every night you're cleansing your brain. Every night when you sleep, you also should be repairing. Your body's in what's called an anabolic state, meaning there's new muscle growth and there's a cell revival going on. When you are awake, you are in a catabolic state. You're in breakdown because you're doing things, you're moving, you're working. All your cells are pretty active with a higher intensity compared to sleep. Not that your body's not doing anything when you're sleeping, but your body's pretty active when you're sleeping. It's just active in recovery. Now, it does help with stress response. It has been shown to have some neuroprotective effects as well. It also influences those neurotransmitters and hormones and pain perception. So you're in a better mood as well. Because if you don't get a good night's sleep, you get cranky the next day and you're not firing off on all cylinders. And it's just like you don't feel right. And reason being is because you're not getting in that deep sleep, and we want your brain firing off on all cylinders. So that's why this one is often used for that. So using peptides is not cheating if you're doing this. You have to create a foundational lifestyle. And if you are not, see, I always say, because patients that I see a lot of the time, you know, they almost feel guilty that, I'm going to get on a GLP-1. But if you're doing everything, you're working out, you're eating right, you're getting your sleep dialed in, you're managing your stress, you think you got your hormones dialed in, then if you're not there, it's not cheating. So they're usually good candidates. Now, sometimes you have to know genetically what is going on. I talked a little bit about MTHFR gene. If there's some methylation issues, a genetic testing will show that. Genetic testing also helps for you to find out if you recover quickly, if you need more sleep, if lifting weights is the big mover for your body to see results. Is cardio the big mover for you to see results? What about are you prone to storing fat? So that's the beautiful thing about genetic testing. You only do it once, and you get to see what works for you. You could maybe a keto diet is not because it's high fat, may not be your friend, because if you have a tendency to hold on to fat, then it's not going to work for you. So that's the beauty about doing genetic testing. So Also, peptides, you have to make sure that, your thyroid is dialed in. If you're, I always say using peptides is not cheating, especially if you have hypothyroid, but you have your thyroid dialed in and you just need a little bit of boost. Now, the GLPs have been used for over 20 years and they're all clinical trials of the effectiveness. Minor dosing is relatively safe, so um, there's really probably not going to be too many clinical trials. Most doctors will probably see this more in their practice. So a lot of us that are working with this, we are seeing more with what our patients are doing. Okay. Oops. All right. What about the risk and benefits? Well, there's risk and benefits to everything, even the food we eat. I always say Cheetos, tricks, lattes, skillets, instant processed food. Nobody ever questions that, but they're like, "Oh, I don't know about peptides," as I mentioned earlier. They're saying that, well, I don't know. I don't trust it because it's not FDA approved. Well, not everything's going to be FDA approved. None of these foods that we are Cheetos, tricks, lattes, skillets, none of them are FDA approved either. So, but you're still eating them and they're still in the grocery store. And are they safe? Well, recently the FDA has tightened regulations on peptides, especially those using compounding pharmacies, and they even removed some from the approved list. The previous administration did this. I'm sure a lot had to do with the connection with the pharmaceutical companies and the FDA. So, there's lack of large-scale clinical trials. There's many peptides that show promising results, but the FDA does require extensive human trials before approving them for widespread use. Sometimes that even means that they just haven't even done it. So that's why they're not FDA approved. Sometimes there's concern over quality control. Some peptides have been sourced from unregulated labs or people are just buying them online. So you got to question the purity. There's also potential for misuse. There's certain peptides, especially the ones that we talked about, the growth hormone secretagogues like the tesamorelin and ipamorelin and samorelin. They have been used off-label for athletic performance and enhancement, but they're also raising red flags for the FDA. Big Pharma's influence. Some believe that the pharmaceutical companies have pushed for peptides bans in order to control the market and the direct consumer toward patent medications. So, but we know athletes are using them. We know surgeons are using them. We know actors are using them because they do work. So there's several delivery methods. You got oral BPC 157 is an example. This is probably the only peptide that is effective for the gut. And you're going to get even some musculoskeletal benefits from that, even some of the whole body, that's why it's called body BP. It should be BPC, body protective compound impacting the whole body. But when you take it orally, it is primarily for the gut, but the entire body still benefits from it. So the joints, muscle tissue, ligaments. However, I would say probably the most popular, but also the most effective is by injections. There's also nasal spray, especially for something like C-Max, C-Lank, the PT-141, that are more for mood. So peptides will not work unless you are doing the foundational work. Your eating template is dialed in. So whether you're using a paleo and or anti-inflammatory diet, eating a whole food diet, you're exercising, I say resistance training is a must. I always tell my patients that is a non-negotiable. If you're going to use peptides, you need to do these. You got to get your sleep dialed in, an uninterrupted sleep, quality sleep. We talked about a cold room. We talked about a dark room. We talked about not having electronics, get rid of your TV, and using even blue blockers if you're watching television or doing work at night, and have a routine. We talked about stress management. We all have stress in life. It's just part of living on this planet called Earth. So we have to have, or we get to have, uh, systems and ways that we can manage stress, whether that's walking outdoors, whether it's going to the beach, whether it's riding your bike, whether it's meditating, whether it's prayer or yoga, whatever way you manage stress. It could even be adult coloring books or painting. There's so much that we can do to manage stress, but that is a non-negotiable. And your hormones must be optimized, your thyroid, your adrenals, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, because if your hormones are not optimized, your peptide, you're not going to get the most out of the peptides. I'm not going to say that they don't work, but how effective are they going to be? It can vary. Everyone's very different. Some people do well, but some don't. So, you got to fix the leaks and, what's broken to get it done. It's kind of like I always say, it's like having a dirty car, you wash it. So washing it helps with the, all of the hormones here. And the peptides are kind of the wax. It really takes it to the next level. We talked about the key hormone players that you should get tested and know what they're doing. PET-TIC is my little acronym: progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. These are the three main sex hormones for women and men. Men, it's mostly testosterone. Women, it's all three. But men, be careful, because if you are an HRT, testosterone replacement therapy, and you're not making any of the changes, you can actually aromatize the testosterone, and it's getting switched over to estrogen. And nobody wants man boobs. So you've got to make sure that these are being tested and monitored. Your thyroid is super important. Insulin, cortisol, these are other players that need to be balanced if you want if you want some results. So if you're thinking of using peptides, you got to do the foundational work, optimize your hormones. You've got to get blood testing done. I mentioned this in the workshop that I have so many people that message me on social media about, hey, I want some copper peptides, or hey, can you get me the Wolverine stack? And, I almost want to ask, do you think I'm a drug pharmacy or something? But I don't make any recommendations. I don't know what that person's history. Did they have cancer? Is there a history of cancer? Are they on what medications? Are they taking supplements? There's a lot to know. So comprehensive blood testing, and we do have on our website like a list of everything from the CMP to the CBC to your lipid panel to vitamin D, B12, your inflammatory markers, all your sex hormones, knowing where DHEA, you want to know where you are. And if you haven't done extensive blood testing, you need to do it. It's basically like if you have a car and you're not checking, they're not doing a whole check on your car and you end up having problems. Well, it's because there was never a thorough check done. Same thing, your labs tell you a lot, but labs and lifestyle will tell you even more. So you have to have a thorough history. Whoever you sit down with, you need to have a thorough history, because you want to know, well, what are your goals? You're not going to be on peptides for the rest of your life. So there's some that you cycle. That's why check-ins are vital, and it's very, very personalized for what your body needs. You may not want to start with, someone may want to start like a growth hormone secretagogue, but yet they have 100 pounds to lose. That probably wouldn't be the best one to start with. So especially if they have a lot of blood sugar issues. So once again, it's very personalized, and you have to integrate them into a healthy lifestyle. A lot of people had issues when they got on Ozempic or Wegovy, and they lost a lot of weight, then they stopped using it or their prescription ran out, and they all gained it back because they didn't go back. They did not create a healthy lifestyle and healthy habits. Macros should be dialed in, especially protein. I talked about something called muscle protein synthesis. Basically, it's exactly what it sounds, you need to have at least, you have to exceed what's called the leucine threshold at each meal, which is typically 2.5 to 3 grams of the leucine, in order to induce muscle protein synthesis, to make muscle, right? If you are not eating enough protein, typically, I look at more like 30 to 40 grams per meal at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're not going to induce that muscle protein synthesis. So you're not going to get the ideal results that you want. I know that sounds like a lot, but as we get older, as we age in life, we actually need more protein. Remember, proteins are short chains of amino acids, and they're the building blocks of our cells. So we need those. Supportive supplements may be needed if you're going to be using peptides. Once again, we got to look at labs because you don't, if you're in a point where, your labs, you're not at optimal ranges. You're almost like, oh, I'm almost a diabetic, but I want to get jacked, It's just like, well, if you're almost a diabetic, it's just like we better work with your blood sugar, and a lot of the GLPs are great for that. So once again, that's something that you have to work with a practitioner. And a lot of the times, if you're just on that borderline, they're like, oh, you're still in the range, so we're not going to recommend that. A good example is for men that are testosterone. A lot of times they only check total testosterone, and the range is about three to 900 or 3 to 1200, depending on where you get tested. And 300 is low. And if you're male and you're kind of feeling like crap, and your total testosterone is at like 350 and your free testosterone is at 5 or 10, you're going to be feeling tired. So you have to get that optimized first. So that is what we talked about. And if you had, oh shoot, it's not in here. Darn it. Okay. We created another, we added a little slide in here, but it's not in here. Darn. So we did talk about research use peptides and pharmaceutical grade peptides. You can get peptides online, but why would you want to do that? Because your research use peptides, they're not regulated. They're not prescribed. You can go online and get them. There's so many other things that are not going to benefit you. Oh shoot, I had wanted to add that to the slides here, but I don't think I'm going to be able to pull it up. So kind of the difference between the research use only peptides, which are RUO, their intended use is for research only. That's why they're called research use peptides. They're not intended for human use. Where the pharmaceutical grade peptides, like you get from compounding pharmacies, we've partnered up with the telehealth peptide company. So you have to, where all those come are from 503A and B pharmacies. So those are pharmaceutical grade, and those are used for human therapeutic uses. There are research only ones. They're not FDA approved. And the pharmaceutical ones are that they are FDA regulated and for compounding or for approved drugs. The manufacturing of the RUOs, they're usually unregulated, and they're done in foreign facilities. But when you are getting them from a compounded pharmacy, you have to have those. It's ISO certified, and they have clean rooms, and they have all these regulations that they have to follow. And the sterility for the RUO peptides, there's really no guarantee. There's usually a high risk of contamination, whereas you have a guaranteed sterilization and endotoxin testing with the pharmaceutical grade ones. And as far as the potency and purity for the research use ones, it's really not even verified. There are some third-party testing, but it's usually not accurate. Actually, there's something called COA, certificate of analysis, that are now being made. And a lot of them they're not even real. So with the compounding pharmacies, you have a guarantee via certificate of analysis. So other one, or certificate of analysis. The other one, as far as the research use, they're online research websites. There's no prescription. However, if something goes wrong and you don't know what to do, nobody's liable for that. Pharmaceutical grade research, or pharmaceutical grade peptides, they come from a licensed pharmacy, and you have to talk to a provider, and usually a medical director, before they're going to be prescribed. So that was the difference that we with the research use only, and I know that there's a lot of people using it, so that's what we are seeing right now.